Question number 1, Todd Barclay.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, does he stand by his statement that building a more productive and competitive economy that supports jobs...
Order. If I hear that level of interjection from the Honourable Ruth Dyson, she will leave me no choice but to ask her to also leave the chamber. Would the member please start his question again so I can hear it?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks, does he stand by his statement that building a more productive and competitive economy that supports jobs and higher incomes is one of the government's priorities?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yes, wages are up 3.1% in the last year, with inflation of just 0.4%, meaning a real lift in the spending power of New Zealand households. And family beneficiary households with children will, on the 1st of April, receive a $25 a week increase. The very lowest income families, something the Labor Party never saw fit to do in its 9 years of office with very large surpluses.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Todd Barclay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Finance, what overseas reports has he received showing New Zealand's resilient economy is well placed to continue moderate growth despite international uncertainty?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the International Monetary Fund issued its concluding statement about the New Zealand economy. It says that the economy is flexible, underpinned by a strong policy framework, and is well positioned to weather a recent slowdown and manage financial stability risks. It says that medium-term prospects for the economy are positive, with business and consumer confidence having recently picked up and net immigration remains strong. They point to a number of risks around the world, but say that the strong public sector balance sheet underpins confidence in New Zealand's economy. This outlook is consistent with moderate growth in jobs and moderate growth in wages.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
What does he say to the people of Gisborne, where there is now 1 in 10 people unemployed, about whether or not jobs are a high priority for his government?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, Gisborne is fortunate to be a resource-based economy, and the lower exchange rate and low interest rates are supporting businesses there to invest, to expand their exports, and therefore to employ more people. And that is backed up by the government's comprehensive approach to economic development in the regions.
Supplementary question, David Seymour.
Does the Minister of Finance still stand by his statement that the government faces no trade-off between the age and level of entitlement to NZ Super?
The Honourable Bill English, that's some distance from the original point, but I'll allow it.
Mr Speaker, yes, as I pointed out to the member yesterday, it's government policy to maintain the age of eligibility and to maintain the current rates of payment. And as I pointed out yesterday, the rate of national super payment has grown. It's grown twice as fast as inflation over the last 7 years. So inflation, since this government's been in power, has been 15%. National super has risen by 30%.
Supplementary question, Todd Barclay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What steps is the government taking to support employment through increasing exports and innovation?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the government takes every step it can to support businesses to do employing, because the alternative is that the government would have to employ everybody. And these are some of the things we're doing to support businesses. Create a single trade window for exporters and importers, which reduces barriers to exporting and importing. Improving the Export Credit Office products and services to help those exporters who are bidding for new contracts in difficult markets, signing free trade agreements with Malaysia, Hong Kong, Korea and ASEAN, and negotiating a free trade agreement upgrade with China, and hopefully with the support of the Labor Party signing off on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. But who would know whether they're for it or against it?
Order. 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 Supplementary question, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Could the Minister advise the country as to which sector is the biggest contributor to New Zealand's gross external debt, thereby retarding a more productive economy and slowing jobs and higher incomes?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I suppose the sector that's the biggest contributor to that would be the one that borrows the most, and that appears to be New Zealand households. And of course it might be a bit difficult to say to New Zealanders they can't have access to borrowed money, because actually for quite a few of them it helps them to buy a house, it helps them to finance their business. We believe New Zealand is gradually improving its external exposure, that is, its proportion of external debt is actually dropping a bit. The current account deficit is progressively a bit better than expected year after year, and New Zealanders' savings have been positive for 5 years, which hasn't happened for the last 25 years.
A point of order, the Right Honourable
I seek to table evidence from the Parliamentary Library that it is the banks that are borrowing $117.9 billion.
Order.
And he got the answer wrong.
Order. The document's been described. It's a very marginal call from my point of view, but I will put the leave and let the House decide. Leave is sought to table that information from the Parliamentary Library. Is there any objection? There is none. It can be tabled. Supplementary question, Todd Barclay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How is the government supporting jobs growth through investment in infrastructure and by improving links between education and employment?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, with respect to infrastructure, easily the largest investment is in extending ultra-fast broadband and the rural broadband. And that is a part of very extensive spend on infrastructure over the next decade. But to improve the links between education and employment, the government has launched over recent years a large number of schemes which assist the progress of young people from education into jobs. One of the results of that is we now have the lowest rate ever of young people not in education, employment or training.
Order. 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 To Derek Ball, when I rise to my feet, I expect the member then to cease his loud interjection. Question number 2, Andrew Little.
Just apologise, eh? Just apologise now.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand